How I insulted my boss and she gave me $10,000. I tried to pick up my boss, Angela, in a bar roughly 3 days before I was hired and moved into her department at a small finance consulting firm. I thought it was a little uncomfortable to discover that my new boss was someone that I'd already heavily flirted with, but since I never took Angela home and we never even kissed, I figured that we could both be professionals about it and move on. Well, that never happened. After realizing who I was, Angela had it out for me to make my life in her office absolutely miserable. She would walk by my desk and randomly take things like tape, staplers, or company pens, always saying that they were company property so she could borrow them as needed, so that I had to stand up and go to our supply room if I ever wanted to find supplies that actually worked. She found out what my favorite food vendor was from our downstairs cafeteria and promptly had them change their menu because of some imaginary complaints from employees about my favorite meal. She had a habit of regularly speaking over me at meetings and, overall, I think she was constantly trying to make me quit so that she would finally be rid of me, without having to give me the unemployment benefits that come with firing someone. But a week before Christmas, after we had a company-wide Secret Santa and Angela actually bought me socks, of all things, I yelled at her and told her she was being a total witch. I told her she was petty, vindictive, cruel, and an overall jerk for taking her fights out all the way to Christmas, and that she shouldn't be in a position of power if this is how she acts. I was not ready for her response. Go to part 2.
How I insulted my boss and she gave me $10,000/2, part 2 of 2. I now realize that my first mistake was hitting on Angela in the first place that day in the bar. My second was not walking out of my shiny new job when I realized that she was the person that would be my new boss. And my third mistake was tolerating the months and months of distraction, harassment, and abuse that she continued to levy against me while trying to cover up her embarrassment over me having seen her after work persona. When she got me socks for Christmas during a Secret Santa 2 years after I had started working, though, I finally had enough. I told Angela that she was a petty, vindictive, and cruel woman, going as far as to say that stuff like this was why people didn't like women in power, since she was completely abusing hers to make my life miserable. Well, it turns out that while I was chewing Angela out, there was an officer from Human Resources nearby. That officer was closer to Angela than me, so she apparently privately spoke to her about everything I'd said. The officer then advised Angela to promote me because if I tried to file a complaint formally against Angela, the officer would have no option but to basically take my side, and Angela's position in the office might be at stake. So, Angela called me in for a meeting, begrudgingly apologized, and asked me if I was interested in a horizontal promotion between job departments. I said yes, so long as I was able to renegotiate my salary. And so, now I receive $10,000 more each year, am in a shiny new department, and never have to think or hear from Angela ever again.
How I befriended my obnoxious mother-in-law. I know from the first week of dating my current husband that I was going to marry him. It was love at first sight, and I had never felt like that with anyone in the world. So, when I casually met my boyfriend's mother over the holidays, I knew in my heart that it wasn't really casual. My boyfriend had told me that his mother was a real piece of work and that I shouldn't bother trying to get on her good side, but I was determined to befriend Sophie anyway because she was going to be the grandmother of my child. So, I got to work. The day I met Sophie, I wore my most conservative outfit and showed up to her home with a bottle of wine. I told her that it was a blend that was supposed to go particularly well with her special meat pies, which I told her my boyfriend was obsessed with. I made a slight mistake by asking her to teach me her recipe, and she grew a little wary of me after that, but I managed to cover my mistake up with a lot of butt kissing. Months later, when I next saw Sophie and the rest of her family for the holidays, I made sure, again, to suck up to her meticulously no matter how annoying her comments about my appearance, my hair, or my clothing grew. Every time she told me that I looked bad or ought to change something, I genuinely heeded her suggestions and always acted as if I saw her haughty arrogance as concern. For a long time, though, the rude remarks didn't go away. 3 years into my relationship, after not making a single objectively poor impression on her, my relationship with her hadn't improved. As my current husband and I started talking about marriage, I knew I had to do something. Go to part 2. How I befriended my obnoxious mother-in-law, part 2 of 2. I still think I was incredibly lucky to have basically fallen in love at first sight with my husband because knowing that I loved him so deeply from the very beginning helped me intentionally make a better impression on his family. However, for the longest time, His mother-in-law Sophie always acted like she disliked me, no matter how much I did to get on her good side. My husband kept telling me not to bother, that he's never had his mother like any of his girlfriends, and that I was better off trying to protect my dignity rather than always throwing it to the side when Sophie would insult me, but I kept my chin down and toughed through it. Nothing changed until the magic night of Christmas, 4 years after my husband and I met. I had been excited for this Christmas for a while already because I had a great gift for Sophie, a fancy, imported Damascus knife that was sure to help with her cooking. It cost me more than any other gift and was probably the priciest thing there at the family Christmas. When it was Sophie's turn to open gifts, she didn't even open the one from me until the very end when people noticed that she'd left some gifts back. She initially expressed no interest in seeing a gift from me, but I urged her to open it. When she saw what I'd bought her, tears sprang into her eyes. She immediately ran over to hug me, touched that I'd not only spent so much but had put so much thought into the gift, and for the first time, she insisted on making the meat pie I begged her to teach me to make, so that she could pass the baton down. 10 years, 2 children, and countless meat pies later, I have a better relationship with Sophie than my own husband, and I'm the one who mediates for the two of them. Hard work really does pay off.
I punched the autistic kid. Now, everyone hates me. There's a kid in my school named Stanley, who I've known since kindergarten. Stanley has had a crush on me since elementary school. The thing is, I'm not gay, and I'm also in a long-term relationship. Stanley's frequent compliments for me used to be flattering, but now, I don't want them. However, Stanley often tells people that I'm his best friend, which means that I'm usually expected to hang around him as much as possible. Teachers often place us together in groups, and I had a guidance counselor try to change my schedule so I would have more classes with Stanley, until I stepped in and explicitly asked for that to not happen. Anyway, I was hanging out after school at a local fast food joint that I worked at. Stanley came in alone, and I served him while I was on my break so we could talk a little. However, Stanley started making really weird comments about me. He kept touching my arm as we were speaking, even though I kept pulling it back. The final straw was when he grabbed my arm and held it there, even as I tugged against him to continue my shift because my break was over. Stanley refused to let go. He started getting upset, and, frustrated, I punched him in the face. I quickly ran back to my station, but some people got videos of the incident. The video looks bad. It's obvious that we're friends and it's obvious that I sucker punched Stanley for what looks like just a bit of hand holding, and now it's spread all over my school. I've been getting dirty looks all day. Stanley still talks to me, but people keep pulling him away from me as if I'm going to punch him again. I don't know what to think. What should I do? What's the scariest thing about nightlife in the city? Gang clubs. Gang clubs are scary because they're genuinely dangerous, and they're so dangerous because most people don't know about them. In any big city in the United States, I can guarantee you that there are gangs. Sometimes they're small, but the bigger the city, the bigger the gangs and, usually, the more clear the territorial disputes between different gangs are. In the city, people don't really differentiate between clubs for music and dancing, clubs for physical entertainment, and gang clubs. That's because your usual gang clubs look exactly like normal entertainment clubs from the outside and inside, and it takes a practiced eye to walk into a club and intuitively know how dangerous the people inside are. If you're ever in the city and you're walking around randomly, it's important to make sure you never accidentally walk into a gang club. Just being inside one is enough for a gang to get a hold of your identity, and a lot of low-level members won't hesitate to extort and harass you for simply stepping into their territory. Moreover, if they follow you and you happen to go into a different gang club that belongs to a different gang, they might peg you as an undercover and they'll make your life miserable. If they don't end your life first, that is. I've seen so many regular people make the mistake of walking into a gang club, being forced into unpleasant situations, and then being regularly blackmailed until they're basically a pawn of the gang. If you want to actually protect yourself when going out into the city, do your research before stepping inside anywhere. Getting involved in a gang is never worthwhile, and it's even less so for a gang club. They're the sleeping serpents of the concrete jungle, so do your best to stay vigilant. What's the pettiest thing you've done in the office? I work in an office where the offices are arranged in sections of 4. In my department, there are 4 desks forming an L shape, and the corner piece belongs to me. This means that I have an interior and an exterior window, the nicest view in the office, and usually a wonderful view of the sunset. The office secretary in particular enjoys standing by the hall and peering through my office to look through my windows. Recently, most of us have been working from home, and we were trying to work out an arrangement with management to create a more solid schedule for coming out and coming in. My boss asked for our opinions on this matter. I said that I would prefer a schedule where I could work both from home 2 days a week. He didn't like the idea at first, but then he agreed to compromise, allowing me to work from home 1 day a week until the end of the year. However, later he changed his mind and said that I could only work from home until the end of month. When I asked why, he explained that the secretary had been complaining nonstop about how it wasn't fair that everyone else gets to work from home while she has to be at the office every day. This happens because the nature of her job doesn't allow working from home. My boss cracked, I guess, and he couldn't handle her complaints anymore. Because this secretary's complaint ruined the good arrangement I had, I decided to draw the blinds and keep my interior window closed permanently. This way, the secretary won't be able to enjoy the view anymore in her sad little office, and whatever pleasure she gets from forcing other people to compensate for her useless job is squashed by the ugly gray walls of our office's interior. Am I the a-hole for taking in my problem cousin and canceling family events? My wife and I own a big farm where our family often gathers. It has a lot of extra living space so that people can visit, which means we always have spare rooms. I am now hosting my niece Alice in one of these rooms, but it's causing waves in the family circle. Basically, my cousin Bill has a daughter named Alice from his first marriage. Sadly, her mom passed away when Alice was just 2 years old. As a result of Bill remarrying, Alice feels left out and neglected in their home. Her stepmom and dad focus a lot on their own kids, calling them the boys and the princess, while Alice is ignored. They don't include her in family trips, don't support her extracurricular activities, and won't pay for her extra school classes. I can see that she's hurting and feels neglected. For the past 4 summers, Alice has been coming to work on our farm because her parents don't want her around during summer break. Recently, when she turned 18, her dad insisted that she should leave their house for college because it would teach her responsibility. So, on her birthday, my wife, Alice, and I packed up her stuff in my truck. We only took things she bought herself or received as gifts from others. We also helped her get back into school and save money. But now, Bill and Tanya are mad at us for taking Alice in, and some other family members are upset too. They think I'm going against Bill and Tanya and undermining them. As a result, many family members are not attending our family events. I don't mind if people come or not, but others are unhappy with my response. My aunt suggested that we have Alice stay with us on weekends and live in a dorm during the week to ease the tension. My wife is smarter and also more attached to the situation. Alice said she'd rather stay with us but would try the dorm idea to make peace. So, am I wrong for not going along with the dorm suggestion to keep the peace?
Teachers, what's a lesson your students have taught you? This was one of the most obvious cases of cheating I've seen in almost 10 years of teaching at the university. There was this student, kind of a business bro, taking my theology class in Greece during a study abroad program. He wasn't really interested in the classes and was more focused on enjoying his time in Greece. I've had students like that before. They do the minimum to get average grades like C's or low B's. When it was time to hand in the term paper, he submitted a paper that was actually written by another student who took the same class in the past. All he did was change the name and date, but nothing else. It was pretty obvious because he submitted it to me in a Google document, meaning I could see the edit history which clearly showed his changes along with the original student's information, and even my comments and grade from the previous paper. According to the school rules, I had the option to fail him for the assignment, fail him for the whole class, or recommend suspending him from the university. I was leaning towards failing him for the class, but the dean and program director preferred that he just fail the assignment. So that's what happened. He got a D in the class and passed. A few years later, I saw him pop up as a recommended connection on LinkedIn. He was about to graduate and had landed a consultant job in a big US city. According to Glassdoor, he was making a lot more money than I was in his first year, probably 3 times my salary. It was surprising because he didn't mean to prove it, but it showed that salary doesn't always reflect hard work, competence, integrity, or intelligence. A sad lesson, but one this kid really drove home for me.
What is the most humiliating thing to happen to you? At my college, students aren't allowed to use the elevators. One day, I was running really late to class after lunch, and I had to climb 5 huge floors. I asked the lift operator if I could use the elevator, and after some negotiating, he agreed. But just as the elevator was about to close and go up, it opened again. To my surprise, it was my professor, the one whose class I was already late for. He scolded me, reminding me that students shouldn't use the lift. They sent me out of the elevator, and the professor warned me that if I was even a minute late to his class again, I'd be in trouble. I needed to attend the class badly, so I came up with a sneaky plan. I sprinted down the stairs, stopping at every single floor. After reaching each floor, I'd press the elevator open button and then sprint faster, making it take longer for the professor to reach the class since the elevator would keep stopping on every floor. However, my plan backfired on the 3rd floor. The elevator doors opened incredibly quickly, and the professor figured out what I was doing. He asked if it was me, but I tried to mumble an excuse about what he had said earlier. He didn't buy it at all, and he made me stay late after class to reprimand me for trying to use a facility that students didn't have access to, for pressuring the lift operator, and finally, for making him late to class. Though, For what it's worth, that professor quickly stopped being so rigid about his attendance policy, so I guess maybe he started to understand that some things really are out of your hands. And instead in the hands of brats who spam the elevator button on every single floor, I guess.